Don't forget, everybody, you gotta stay humble, okay? You got to stay humble. All right, now that I've hopefully pissed off the Merab deniers, right, and the quite frankly delusional MMA viewers who thought that Umar was just going to walk through someone who's as elite as Merab with the craziest gas tank we've ever seen. Now, this is a crazy performance from Merab. This may actually be my favorite performance of his because it was an exciting fight, and credit has to go to Umar Nurmagomedov for making it a fight for the earlier parts of the round. But man, there was a point, I think in round 4, I believe it was, where it honestly appeared as if Merab could have finished Umar if he put on even more pressure and threw more shots. He was hurting Umar to the body. And this fight essentially went almost to a T, exactly as I expected. I expected Umar would pick up the first, second round maybe. I expected him to make it look like a pretty close fight. Even look like he's ahead of Merab. When both men were fresh, you could see the difference on the feet. Umar was a little bit more crisp. He was more explosive, more powerful. Clearly, he did land a pretty nice right hand, which is beautiful, man. He feinted the knee, switched stances into orthodox, and landed a nice 2 down the pipe. That clearly had an effect on Merab for a moment. But that was really the only moment of the fight where Merab was in any sort of danger. We saw another vintage Merab performance. He's now done this. Keep in mind, he's now done this to Marlon Moraes, Jose Aldo, Peter Yan, Henry Cejudo, Sean O'Malley, and Umar Nurmagomedov. In my opinion, I thought there was already an argument beforehand, like before this win, that he was the bantamweight GOAT just based off of the resume alone. I know Dominic Cruz is probably greater all time. You could even argue that TJ Dillashaw is because like the title defenses and all that. But what Merab has done to all of these elite competitors, right, well-rounded fighters who on paper should be beating him, but Merab proves that on paper means absolutely nothing when you have the craziest gas tank of all time. And it's not just the gas tank. Of course, people will try and take away from his skill set and say, oh, well, he's on EPO. He's not that good. He just has a crazy gas tank. But you need to be skilled to weaponize the gas tank the way that he does. You can't just have crazy cardio, go out there and not get beat up by some of the best fighters in the world. It doesn't work like that. You need to have skill to go along with it. And I think Merab has proven that he's one of the best fighters in the world. And I mean, I don't want to get ahead of myself and say one of the best fighters of all time, but who do you see beating this guy? Who actually beats Merab when you get down to it? In my opinion, the only fighter at 135 who actually beats Merab is, I mean, it's going to sound rich to say, but this current version of Peter Yan that we saw against Davison, he's the only one who I see as being dangerous enough to hurt Merab if he's able to catch him. But even then, like, if Peter Yan, as much as I want to see Peter Yan reclaim that title, it would be weird to pick against Merab with anybody. It doesn't matter who. Merab is the most overpowered fighter of all time. He is like the final boss in a game that takes you about fucking 50-something tries to complete, like an Elden Ring. You're throwing your controller across the room. You go through about 3-4 controllers trying to beat this guy. That is how I see Merab. I would never want to fight this dude. He's one of the greats. And listen, it's just done now. No more taken away from this dude. And stop hyping up fighters just because they have the Nurmagomedov name. Now, of course, like I said, Umar proved to be elite. Of course he's elite. Right? You don't beat Corey Sandhagen the way that he did. At least, I feel like there was a lot of overinflating the dominance of that win, to be honest. Like just trying to build up Umar and trying to qualify him for, even being in the position that he was in to fight for the title. Because for me, just based off the quality of wins, I think Peter Yan's last 2 wins against Song Yadong and now Davis Figueiredo, especially in the fashion that he did it, probably warranted more of a title shot than Umar did. But just based off the timing alone, right, it made sense for Umar to get the shot. And now it's being revealed that Merab apparently had horrible staph infection, injuries here, injuries there. Listen, the dude's unstoppable, and I will never pick against him ever again until, of course, the rematch is made with Peter Yan. It's simple as that. Was Umar fraud checked? I would say to an extent, yes. His gas tank was definitely fraud checked, but then again, whose gas tank doesn't get fraud checked by Merab? So it's hard to say that he's fraud checked, but I mean, there's a reason why he was pushed to a title so fast, because I can honestly see a lot of contenders beating someone like Umar. I think Davison gives Umar a tough fight. I think Peter Yan absolutely dusts Umar Nurmagomedov. I think Sean O'Malley gives him a hard time as well. I just don't think that Umar's as good as a lot of people thought. Not as good as I thought. I would say he's about as good as I thought, because I thought this exact scenario would take place. But I'm still interested in seeing the guy fight down the line. But let's just temper our expectations going forward. Just because someone is from Dagestan and fights under Abdulmanap's banner, right, does not mean that they're all of a sudden going to go on their entire career going undefeated But a last name ain't good enough, man. And you got to stay humble. And all of this talk, right, the overuse of this term humble, especially being levied towards Merab Dvalishvili. He's one of the most humble champions we've ever had. The guy doesn't talk shit. He doesn't go after people's character and all that unless you go after him and you disrespect him in some way. Then he matches the energy. He's actually one of the most humble fighters in the UFC, right? Considering who he's beaten and the level of disrespect, that he should have this crazy chip on his shoulder. But he goes out there, ragdolls people, gasses you out, and then emotes on you while kicking your ass. I cannot think of a more humiliating way that Umar could have lost his fight. Obviously being KO'd by Merab, which was a scenario that could have taken place. There was even a nice shot that Merab landed, a good right overhand that he kind of chin checked Umar with a little bit. Umar ate it well. Like, clearly Umar's a tough guy, right? He's a tough guy. He's hard to finish, right? I feel like in the state that he was in, it just goes to show like how, like, I don't want to say that Merab's not dangerous, but he's not dangerous. He's actually one of the least dangerous fighters in the UFC, which just makes it so crazy how consistently he's able to go in there with the same game plan, and it just works every single time. It just works, and it blows my mind. Merab Dvalishvili, man, he's gone in like the last few years from being an ultra hater of his after what he did to Jose Aldo and Peter Yan, of course, to just being a mega fan. The dude is so elite, and it just can't be denied anymore. And like I said, Umar, just got to stay humble there, buddy. You got to stay humble and stop making excuses. But I know, of course, your fans will be making all the excuses in the world for you. They'll all be pointing to the hand. Oh my God, he broke the hand. You see, he said he broke the hand, so he needs a rematch right away. Pussies, bro. Stop making excuses for these elite fighters. They don't need your excuses. But of course, Umar's already shown, right, in that moment, the dude cannot take a loss. You know, at first I thought maybe Joe Rogan was misinterpreting what he was saying. Maybe he thought that he was, because at first I thought that Umar said that he didn't deserve to win the fight, and that he didn't win the fight. And I thought, okay, cool. And then Joe Rogan, it seemed like he misinterpreted him and said, okay, so you think you won the fight. But then Umar kind of mirrors what Joe Rogan said and said, yeah, I think I won, but I have to rewatch the fight and all this, and I wasn't able to, pull through with my game plan because of the broken hand and all that. And shut the fuck up, man. You got tired. It didn't matter if you had a left hand that was broken or intact, whatever. It doesn't matter, because who broke the hand, right? You broke it on a part of Merab's body, right? Shore up the technique a little bit. Stop throwing limp-wristed punches, and maybe you won't break your hand, right? But of course, this shit happens in fights, and that's exactly the point. It's like Umar can use the excuse that he hurt his hand in the fight. But guess what, man? If what Merab is saying is to be true, the guy went in there with one of the nastiest cases of staph infection and kind of made it look easy against Umar Nurmagomedov. So I'm just going to leave it at that. This fight was awesome. It was, I would say, fight of the year so far. It was honestly great. Joe Rogan, I think, definitely went above and beyond. I think he went overboard in saying, that was truly one of the best fights I've ever seen. Like, buddy, we get it. You were excited in the moment. But let's just reel it back in a little bit. It was an amazing fight, but like arguably it wasn't even fight of the night. I think Yuri versus Jamal Hill was arguably fight of the night, but we'll get into that pretty soon. In fact, let's talk about that right now, man. Yuri versus Jamal Hill. People were crazy for picking against Yuri in this fight because he gets chinned by one of the best strikers of all time, and Alex Pereira twice. He gets beaten by him twice. Suddenly Jamal Hill is now a favorite to beat him, and he's going to snipe him, put him out, as if Jamal Hill didn't also get KO'd by Alex Pereira. Like, anyone can be KO'd by Alex Pereira. This isn't a special case because Yuri, I get it, like the accumulative damage, him being knocked out twice by him. Of course, the last knockout looked horrible, but Yuri is just a different breed, and you kind of just have to come to terms with that and stop picking him to lose to anybody except for Alex Pereira, because no one can put the lights out of Yuri Prochazka. You need to have that different type of power that Alex Pereira possesses. Jamal Hill, he's a pretty sharp puncher. He landed some good shots on Yuri, but Yuri came in here with something to prove. He wasn't going to lose to anybody that night, I don't believe. Yes, Alex Pereira would have beaten him, but that version of Yuri is the best fighter at 205 other than Alex Pereira. Obviously, you could say that Ankalaev is better, but I think that version of Yuri, who went in there slipping off the center line, and he landed like the knockdown combination, right, leading up to the finish that he landed on Jamal Hill, is a carbon copy of Alex Pereira's favorite combination, right, to throw off the slip, right. He slips right hand, left hook, although it was opposite sides, right. Flip it. Yuri slipped off the center line. through the left hand, right hook behind it, drops Jamal Hill, bar for bar, exactly what Alex Pereira likes to throw, except in southpaw, as opposed to orthodox. A thing of beauty. Clearly, he learned a lot of things from the ass beatings he took from Alex Pereira, and that's just why I love him as a martial artist, as a man. He's just one of the most entertaining, one of the most stand-up fighters in the UFC. And, respect to Jamal Hill for going out there and banging. He showed toughness. I can't take anything away from him. I get it. He's made an absolute fool of himself. I just hope that he takes this loss with some kind of grace. I really do hope so. But, man, what a finish. What a knockout. What a performance from Yuri Prochazka. And then I want to get into the main event quickly. I know. I spoke about the co-main, and then I went back to the fight before the co-main. Now we're talking about the main event. But I just don't think the main event's that interesting to talk about. Islam did the obvious thing that you'd expect him to do. It wasn't exciting. I think everyone was expecting him to win, even myself. I know I picked Moicano, but at the same time, we all knew that Islam would make it look relatively easy, and he did. As soon as the fight went to the ground, he proved that nobody can hang with him there. And I think it makes Dustin Poirier's performance look even better, because Moicano on paper should be a better grappler than Islam, but man, he had nothing. He had nothing for him on the ground. It was crazy, and he did better on the feet than I think a lot of people were expecting him to. Islam ended a nice left hand down the pipe, but the fight just didn't go very long, and yeah, ultimately, man, just went exactly as I think everyone saw it going. I think it could have ended any way that Islam wanted it to go. I thought it was weird that he didn't shake Moicano's hand, even though Moicano kept him as the main event on this card. Right? If he didn't want to step in, who would have stepped in? Would have been Dariush. Okay, sure, maybe Dariush would have taken the opportunity. But I feel like Moicano deserves the respect for taking that, because ultimately I feel for Moicano here, because was it likely that he would have gotten to a title shot organically? Probably not. And now that he's, I don't want to say fumbled this chance, because it's hard to say that anyone taking this fight on short notice. I understand he was in camp and all that, but preparing for Dariush is much different than preparing for someone like Islam. So yeah, he technically fumbled the chance, and all I can say is that Moicano, just keep taking the fun fights, keep speaking the truth, and you will stay in the fans' good graces, man. Just don't take a loss the way Jamal Hill does, and don't forego your nature, and keep going down the path you're going on. And I think Moicano can remain as one of the stars in the UFC right now, one of the more likable characters, which he is. But I'd like to go on and talk about the rest of the card, from top to bottom. I know I touched on the final 3 fights of the card. I just want to go touch on Ulanbekov versus Clayton Carpenter. Clayton Carpenter, the first of 4 undefeated fighters to lose their O. Today I did pick Tagir Ulanbekov to win by decision, I believe. Yeah, Carpenter looked pretty good in the first round, but then Ulanbekov kind of just took over, looked better on the feet, looked better in the grappling, just a better performance. And he deserved to win. He deserved to win. Just simple as, right? Let me get Bernardo Sopai versus Ricky Turcios. I picked him to win. Did I pick him to finish Turcios? Oh, I think I picked him by decision also, so I got that one right. And Turcios, he's just not very good. He's just not good, that's all. And then we get on to Rinya Nakamura versus Muin Gafurov. Now, I'm a bit, I don't want to say I'm salty about this one, but it's an unfortunate one, because I was at one point touting Rinya Nakamura as being a future title contender, right? A future champion. I was personally putting him above someone like Payton Talbott as far as a prospect goes. Now, I might not get many arguments now after last night's performance, which we will get into from Talbott, but Rinya, he looked okay at times, man. He's explosive, but he was just swinging wildly. I remember his hands looking a lot better. He was swinging like Justin Gaethje was against fucking Max Holloway at times, just completely swinging himself off balance. No technique there. Gafurov just dominated him, hurt him on the feet, dropped him a couple of times. I don't know if he was getting dropped or if he was getting hit off balance, but it happened so many times that you'd have to say that he got dropped at least once or twice in that fight. And yeah, more than a deserving victory for Gafurov there, even if Nakamura did kind of, He took over in the last couple of minutes, but that's about it. Then we get into Karol Rosa versus Eileen Perez. Now, this is a weird fight for me because, in my opinion, you just cannot give that fight to Eileen Perez. She was landing nothing of significance on the feet. Karol Rosa wasn't landing a whole lot, but at least she was chewing up the legs and having noticeable effects on Eileen Perez. I get Perez gets to twerk and people like that shit, and she does OnlyFans, and I guess people like that, but she didn't win a fight here. In my opinion, she did not win a fight. And the confidence and the commentators calling the win for Eileen Perez and constantly saying that Karol Rosa needs to do more, even though Eileen was doing fuck all and landing fuck all. I don't understand it. I really don't understand. Karol Rosa, for me, got robbed here. That, for me, was a bad robbery, but I would like to know your thoughts in the comment section below as well. Then we get into Grant Dawson versus Diego Ferreira. Super boring fight. I think I predicted a second or third round submission for Grant Dawson, but he did get the win. it's a pretty good performance. It was boring as all hell, and then in like the last minute, there was actually some hands being slung at each other, and it was fun for the last little bit. But yeah, Grant Dawson got another win for himself. Good for him. Then we get into Bogdan Guskov versus Billy Alakana. Billy Alakana looked pretty good. His hands looked pretty good in the first round especially, but Guskov took over and got the submission win. He's not that impressive, Guskov. I don't see him as a future like top 5 at all. Maybe he can go as far as the top 10 just because 205 is such a shitty division. But yeah, he's not that great, but still good submission win for him. Then we get into Azamat Bakoyev with some of the nastiest looking ground and pound I've ever seen. It's been a long time since I've seen somebody sleep an opponent to the degree that he slept Zachary Reese with a ground and pound shot, man. Disgusting. This dude's terrifying. He's terrifying. Middleweight needs to be put on watch. DDP, all these dudes, right? Watch out for Bakoyev, because he will be pushed up the rankings relatively quickly, I believe. And he's a problem for everybody. The dude looks like he's on steroids. Like, somebody prove me wrong here. Is that guy on juice? I'm pretty sure I read something about him being on juice before getting signed to the UFC. So can we be sure that he's not on juice now? Because the dude sure as hell looks juiced out of his fucking mind. Like he's some kind of a Russian experiment. But him versus Gregory Rodriguez, at some point, man, inject that into my veins. That shit would be crazy. But then we get into the fraud check of all fraud checks and Payton Talbott versus Raoni Barcelos. Now there was a small part of me that saw this potentially happening. Like Raoni Barcelos is just so much more experienced, and I think that's what we got. But he completely dominated Payton Talbott on the ground, and even on the feet in the last round when they were exchanging, Raoni Barcelos was getting the better of those exchanges. Yeah, Payton Talbott did have some moments. He did land some good shots, but I think we saw, man, that he's just too one-dimensional to make it. Like, could he get into the top 15? Probably. But for how stacked bantamweight is and how talent-rich bantamweight is, I don't even see him as a top 10 fighter anymore. You shouldn't be getting dominated, right, 30-26 by someone like Raoni Barcelos. That just doesn't really happen, right? You look at someone like Umar and slept him in the first round, I'm pretty sure it was, and then Payton Talbott gets taken all the way to decision and gets 30-26. It's a bad look. I mean, I think he was already too hyped to begin with, but at the same time, dude, bad look for him, bad look, but hoping that he comes back. But like I said, man, bad look for him. It's a setback for sure. But, if he was ever destined for greatness in the first place, and he'll claw his way back and, get himself into those conversations, right? But as of right now, that, in my opinion, is what a fraud check is exactly. But then we get into Kevin Holland versus Rainier de Ritter, and de Ritter made it look easy after Kevin Holland's pathetic showing on the Jackson podcast. I'm glad this happened to him. Rainier de Ritter is coming for that belt. Him versus DDP. It is written in the stars. This goofy matchup is needed. The only thing that I'm disappointed in is the fact that Rainier de Ritter and Kevin Holland didn't get to sling inflatable two-man punches at each other and have that type of exchange. We didn't really get it, but he made easy work and submitted Kevin Holland in round 1. I think I predicted round 3 submission. I thought Holland would be able to maybe deal with it for the first couple of rounds, but nope. He's trash and should be fucking far away from the UFC roster, in my opinion. Then we get into Jailton Almeida versus Sergey Spivak, and we got a very irregular performance from fucking Jailton Almeida. The guy was slinging hands, and his hands actually looked good, which begs the question, why doesn't he do this more often? Why does he not use his boxing more often? Because his hands actually looked pretty good. So did he just make me a fan of his? Not necessarily. He's going to have to display that a couple more times. But then again, since we now know that he can strike like that, right? He actually packs some kind of a punch as well, and he can grapple. He might be, secretly the nightmare matchup for Tom Aspinall, right? It's possible, although I still think Aspinall beats the shit out of him. But very impressive round 1 knockout over Spivak. I actually picked Spivak. So yeah, I had a pretty good prediction rate on this card. Not great. I didn't actually tally it up because I don't really give a shit. But at the end of the day, man, I had such a fun time watching this card. It was a banger. We had some fraud checks. 4 undefeated fighters lost their O, which is crazy to happen on one card. But awesome fights, man. And what a way to return to the pay-per-views, man. I'm excited. I'm excited for what the rest of the year has in store for us, aside from the next pay-per-view card, because that card is absolutely dog shit, and the UFC should be ashamed for putting that out there and charging for it. It's insane. But then again, guys, appreciate you watching as always, and I'll see you on the next one.